Okay, I'm pulling it up now. Hopefully it'll start showing soon. I'll just say quickly, Rob, thanks for that update, and Jose Luis as well. That was really interesting to hear about and see some of those patterns. Let's see. Okay, is that showing up for you guys now?
Yes, it looks great.
Fantastic. Okay, so I also just want to say a big round of applause to Hira for all the work that she's done since November. Obviously, she'd been involved with some of these efforts previously, but she has done a tremendous amount of work, and as she hinted, in a volunteer fashion. So we were getting a lot of dollars for zero, or a lot of dollars worth of work for zero. And so thanks, Hira, for all that you've been doing. And so I'm here to quickly report back on one of our attempts at finishing some work on some low-hanging fruit based on some of the great discussions we had back at the November symposium. And this is to develop a pamphlet or one-pager or brochure that would really focus on key attributes of restoration with cuckoos in mind, especially within the breeding range of the Western distinct population segment. I'll also say, I feel like more the mouthpiece than the muscle behind this talk, and that's why I've put Lily and Patty's names in bold and bigger font, because I sent an initial email in January, and it seemed like within a couple of weeks, Lily had done a bunch of research on other brochures and what an effective design would be, and started to draft an outline. And then Patti took it and filled it in with a bunch of key information that the rest of us have been able to then work with. So a shout out to both of them for their work. So what I'm going to do is just spend a minute or two talking about sort of our process that we've been taking over the last couple of months, but also make clear that there's room for input, because what we want is for this to be useful for the 79 or so people that are on this Zoom, as well as managers, implementers, folks that might be considering habitat restoration. So we're definitely seeking additional eyes on this, both during this, the next 7 minutes and, the rest of today, but also the next few months or the rest of the year. And so part of that was just, like I mentioned, Lily researching other brochures and looking at layout and researching the literature. And then a couple of the key questions we've really been thinking about is the scale at which to go at this. And so we've been, I think, multiple of us kind of wrestling with, okay, what are we shooting for? Are we shooting for a singular restoration guide that would be more general and broad across the whole range of the Western distinct population segment? And then do we also want to develop more local versions, whether that be statewide or maybe multi-state regions? And so, a suggestion that Lily threw out early on was, do we think about kind of a Northwest, a Desert Southwest, and a Great Basin Rockies subdivision that might sort of key in on certain species or species combinations that occur in cuckoo habitat in those areas? So that's one of the questions we've been wrestling with, and also how much specifics to get into, including, listing plant species, or do we focus more on elements of structure and water levels in these restoration sites? So again, some of this is still an open question, but I guess the idea that I'm sort of favoring at the moment would be to first work towards a single broad one-pager, or realistically two-pager or trifold pamphlet, but that would just have general guidelines and maybe not get into as many specifics, but focus again more on structure and our outcomes that we'd like to see happen. But then using the website that Hira has already highlighted, maybe have a page on that website that could be where we could host much additional information and maybe even go into some of those regional specifics. So that's one potential outcome. But I think once we develop a working document or a living document that could serve as the broad range wide form, then we could certainly adapt that for other regions. So I'll spend the next couple of minutes just giving you guys screenshots of what we've developed so far. And I don't expect you to read all of this, but I just want to give you a sense for the layout of, and again, this is an incomplete product. It's in a Word document right now, so not the most flashy format yet, but we're just trying to get the content right and then probably put it into a different program to make it more flashy, but just to get a sense for content and what we're thinking about including. And so on the first page would be obviously a picture of a cuckoo, which I think would be handy for something like this, and a paragraph about the cuckoo and some of their habitat needs and why it's a threatened distinct population segment. A range map, and so this is what we have for now. We can think about if we want to drill down and actually show currently occupied areas or the designated critical habitats. So this is one section, and if I have time for questions, I can scroll back through these. But again, mainly I just want to get this on your radar and encourage folks that might be interested to get involved as we try to take this to the finish line. And then scrolling down a little bit further on that page, we have details about how to cite restoration activities, including designated critical habitat, but other key sites across the range, naturally dynamic river systems, or areas with irrigation infrastructure and water rights that would allow for more of a manipulative restoration approach. And then you see we have a section for native plant species in cuckoo habitat, and we're still wrestling with, do we want to include all of this detail in a broad general one pager, or maybe in a section like this focus more on a few bullets about the habitat structure that we're aiming for, and maybe just list a few of the common species that are range wide, but then reserve more of the specifics for either the website or regional or state specific one pagers. And then on the second page, we have this drafted, and you can see I've got some comment boxes that are going off into nowhere for this presentation, but some active comments that we're still working to resolve that I'm not showing here, but just to show that this is an in progress document. But general guidelines and acknowledging that most of this is based on work in California and Arizona. So we'd like to flesh this out a little bit. And then some ideas about monitoring and effectiveness monitoring of the restoration and what we would need to do for that. And so one of the thoughts is, do we include some other bird species that commonly co-occur with cuckoos? But do we also use things like fish habitat and fish growth in certain areas as another thing to monitor? So a lot of things that are in our minds, and then we've got some citations and suggested reading. So I think that's all that I wanted to share at this moment. And I hope there's maybe a minute or two for questions. But like I said, we've got a bunch of us that have looked at this and put some effort into it. But we have a ton of experts that are definitely more expert than me about cuckoos and what habitat works for them. And so I might be reaching out if you don't volunteer yourself. But if anybody's like, wow, I'd love to be involved in that and help make that a great product, then we'd love to hear from you. So if there's a minute or two for questions now, great. If not, something we can address later on today or in the future.
Yes, we do have 2 minutes for questions. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hands or type them in the chat. Just give it a second. Typing in chats is difficult. Okay, if not, awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. And we will have time for questions later in case anybody has any questions that come up after Jay leaves us. Oh, just kidding. John Stanek raising hand.
A real quick question, and I bet I know the answer. Jay, vegetation is super important, but have you guys discussed prey and food availability and ways to tackle that very important yet often neglected resource?
It's a good question, and I will say that hasn't been a part of the thought process so far. Just focused on maybe the structure of habitat that we want to seek, and maybe hoping that if you build it, the big insects will come. But I think that could be worth acknowledging or at least pointing to that. I think again that's part of the question of how much specifics do we get into for a 1 or 2 pager.
Thanks.
Kristen, you're muted.
Thank you. So that was all the questions for Jay. Next up is Murrelet Halterman with recovery and planning. You should be co-hosted, so you're ready to go at any point.
All right. First, using a new computer. Can everyone hear okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So I don't have a presentation. I'm just going to go over some notes of what we've been doing and where we stand at this point. So first, at this point, we're only tackling the veg data sheets. That's come up as the kind of biggest, the nail that's sticking up that needs to be hammered down. It's causing the most issues. The basic protocol, looking at revisiting that, but the protocol itself is not likely to, we're not anticipating any significant changes there. Again, just working on the veg data sheet at this point. So Adam and John and I met in late January. We outlined concerns and issues with the current data sheet, and we had several ideas about things to add, remove, or modify on that data sheet. And then in early February, I met with Susan Sfera and Megan Conway, and we again talked about some, things that needed to be looked at, concerns, ideas, and including but not limited to compatibility with current databases, the usability of the form by surveyors, and also the utility of the data. And that last one is probably we're kind of starting there and hoping that we can feed back into the making sure we come up with something that is going to capture the information a little better than we have than we think perhaps has been captured in the past. We are at this moment working on a time to have a larger group that would have a meeting with them, and hopefully that will happen this month. But the take-home message is that the current veg data sheet will be used this year, and we also have a goal of, before the field season, coming up with a draft new veg data sheet. So hopefully by the end of May that would happen, and then we would like to see if there are volunteers who want to take this new data sheet on a test drive. And take it out in the field, fill it out, some different places, and then in the fall we'll get feedback on how it worked, where there were gaps, that type of thing. So that's where we stand at this point. And Adam and John, if you have anything, anything it seems I missed, that would be great. But like I say, we're just kind of in the process of trying to get everybody together, all the interested parties together, to have a meeting and just make sure we go over and are including everyone, and that we cover everything that needs to be covered. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that update.
Great.
You got a
just didn't say thank you. You're welcome. Oh,
great. Perfect.
Hey, Murrelet, I got a quick question for you. This is John Stanek. From your
Great.
talk with Megan and Susan Sfera, did you get an indication of what is working well and what's not working well with the veg data collection?
The percentages and the species names are definitely not working well. Having a whole bunch of species list, that 5 species and percentages, definitely problematic. For each of the, whether it was canopy, understory, whatever the category was, that was the data that was coming in is all over the map as far as what seems reasonable, what people are coming up with for species. So that definitely is a major point to try and work on, and whether that's going to be whether it's going to come up with like some general categories rather than species. Not quite sure. Hopefully in the March, or in this meeting in a few weeks, we'll be able to kind of come up with some ideas. But again, definitely trying to that's definitely the place where there's the most problematic data is happening and or being collected. And so definitely try to figure out how to capture that information in a way that everyone is capturing it equally. As I say, the utility and usability of that data form. So that seems to be that's what they came up with as kind of the biggest issues with the data set that they're dealing with. And I mean, they've spent tons and tons of time, lots of people have working on that to get it entered in the database to try and make it relatively uniform. But again, they said that that's probably where they're seeing, I mean, there's some other areas, but that is probably the what came up right off the bat.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Great. So we have no other questions in the chat. We can give it a second. If someone else wants to unmute themselves. If not, thank you so much. And next up is Kristen Dillon.
Hi, thank you. I don't have a presentation either to share my screen or anything. I'm kind of just giving an update. I guess kind of the big picture about what is going on with development of a regional database at this point. Megan Conway and I are kind of trying to pick up where Susan Safara left off regarding developing a centralized yellow-billed cuckoo database. Susan had many discussions with folks who would be contributing data to that database, but it sounds like the conversations about the details of what exactly the database should look like were kind of put on hold until she could figure out exactly how to create such a complex database, who would host it, and how it would be funded. So those are kind of the $1 million questions we are trying to start with. I have been working with Bureau of Reclamation for the last 6 years, and I just switched over to the Fish and Wildlife Service myself. Prior to leaving Reclamation, I spoke with some of the enterprise geodatabase specialists there, just to kind of get an idea of the feasibility of creating a range-wide database hosted by a federal agency that would allow various levels of permissions, as well as the cost of such a project. It's definitely technically feasible to create and host it. And from what they said, it would be costly, but not astronomical. Although we were certainly speaking in pretty general terms at the time. It was kind of an exploratory exercise to see what was possible. I think it would probably make much more sense for the service to actually host the database. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has similar database specialists, and Megan Conway and I have scheduled a meeting with them in order to discuss the details of feasibility, cost, timeline for development, kind of the access and permissions details that would be relevant. We had to schedule that meeting quite a ways out in order to get everyone necessary on the phone at the same time. So it just so happens that the way it falls, that meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. So rather unfortunate, given our working group meeting is today, just in terms of being able to give a more comprehensive update. But we are really looking forward to the discussion tomorrow and expect it to really kind of enable us to determine what the next steps will be. I suspect, just given my prior conversations with folks over at Reclamation, that discussion will likely confirm that the capacity and ability to create and host the database we're looking for, with kind of the specifications that we need, certainly exists on a technical level, and it will kind of help us determine how much legwork we need to do in terms of costs and funding. That's kind of the big wild card right now. I think depending on what the financial requirements are going to be, hopefully we'll be able to move forward in the near future with kind of gathering input from biologists currently collecting and managing the data across the species range to develop a schema and discuss everybody's needs and desires and what a centralized database would actually look like and how it would be usable. Again, I recognize that the timing of our meeting with the database folks is somewhat unfortunate. But I can certainly update the working group after that meeting and kind of summarize what we learned tomorrow. But if there are any questions for me at the moment, please definitely let me know.
Nothing in the chat. Give it a second for a hand raise. Perfect. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Great, thank you.
I got a question.
Great.
I'm sorry, I'm
Awesome.
slow on the hand raise. Again, John Stanek. Kristen, are you guys going to discuss the possibility of electronic database entry? I know ARC collector field maps is not the best option, but is that something that's on the table for your discussion? Some sort of electronic data entry.
Yeah, I think that that is certainly something that other folks have brought up as well in previous discussions in terms of capabilities of a centralized database like this. Basically, so there's complexity, right? We have the situation of historical data in all of these different formats, new data being collected on paper, and also people who would like new data to be collected electronically. Using collector or whatever you prefer. So yeah, I think definitely that is one of the questions for kind of the database development specialist. How do we kind of merge all of these different data types? Is it possible to link with field-based data collection in some instances, as well as having someone who wants to more manually upload data at the end of the season? I will certainly say I'm kind of the one trying to facilitate this. I am far from being a database development expert. So those are questions I can't answer, but are definitely on the list to ask.
Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. And we do have a hand raised from Carolyn Roning as well.
Hey, Kristen, this is Carrie Ronning calling from LCR MSCP down here in Reclamation on the lower Colorado River. Let us know if you need help or you need biologists who also know database and field maps and relational databases to help translate some of that. We do have a lot of that capability, and from the position of our program, the less we have to transform data to send it to the service and the heritage programs, the better. And we do have a relational database we're trying to merge legacy data into with lots of cuckoo detections in there. So, so let us know. And we are using AGOL and field maps, but also have folks who enter data after the fact when systems aren't working. So like I said, just want to make sure you knew that we were here and willing to help where we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I completely hear what you're saying in regards to, not wanting to have to do a ton of legwork on your end in order to change things, in order to move them into a centralized database. I think that is certainly something we have heard across the board. Everybody is collecting and storing data in different ways. So certainly one of our questions for, kind of the technical developers is, what is the difficulty associated with transforming all of those different formats into a centralized database without needing people to change the format they're using on their end or re-enter data on their end? Because that's, that kind of is a non-starter. No one has time for that. But thank you. I will definitely reach out, and I'm sure your expertise will be very helpful in this.
Perfect. I think that's all for questions. Thank you so much again. And we'll pass it on to Shannon McNeil.
Hey everyone. I also don't have a presentation. So I'm talking about grants and fundraising, basically for restoration. And I have to apologize that I haven't done a whole lot on this, but I was chatting with Patti a while back about, I guess I have 3 points. One is that I think we all know that, yes, it's hard to get funding for a single species. So linking cuckoo habitat restoration with other species. And so in Oregon, where Patti is now, there's a lot of funding for fish habitat restoration. So we could kind of get in on some of the fish restoration funding to help cuckoos. Another thing is here in California, there's just billions of dollars for fire. It's all about reducing the risk of large wildfires. And if there's any way we can link reducing fire risk to restoration of riparian forests, then I think that could be a way to go. And then a third point is, in the past year, I was kind of hanging out with an actual fundraiser. I should have hung out with her more to learn more about fundraising. But anyway, about the last thing she ever said before she left the area was, "Oh, well, everyone knows that fundraising is all about like finding benefactors now. It's not about like putting your hands out of, please give us a few cents to help us." So I'm just hoping that maybe we could have a little push for identifying the Bezos, Musks and DiCaprios of the world who are like, "Oh, cuckoos, yeah, that'd be fun. I'll give you $1 million to do that." Anyway, that's just my optimistic side of me thinks that we could organize something like that. Anyway, that's really all I have. Oh, I should mention that there is this like page of there's 13 entries in database of the grants that we could pursue. So there's that too. Edwin has a question.
We have a couple.
Hey, hi there. I just had a couple comments. I'm thinking maybe one way, another consideration would be, thinking back to the presentation from Jay about developing those habitat restoration recommendations, that perhaps, if we take that a step further and work on identifying state or regional specific recommendations, that those could serve as a vehicle to encourage land management agencies to apply those recommendations as they work on this riparian areas. And I think that might be more a quicker way to kind of promote this kind of work. In addition to seeking funding, because some of these agencies already have funding that they have for implementing restoration work. But if we're able to kind of provide some guidelines or recommendations where we could have, encourage some of that work to benefit cuckoos, I think we would accomplish the same kind of outcome. Because I think us or the partnership seeking funding to implement restoration work seems more of a challenging approach.
Yeah, I also like the idea of breaking it out by region, and actually I'm even not sure how to I feel like Southern California is a area where there's a lot of potential for restoration and not a lot of cuckoos. But it doesn't really doesn't all fit into the desert Southwest, because it's west of the Sierras, and it's not really Pacific Northwest either. So that might be another separate region of Southern California.
Great, we have another hand raised. Go right ahead.
Yeah, this is Ty Sipley, also in Arizona. I like Edwin's thinking about maybe breaking this apart regionally. Arizona is up to its eyeballs in forestry funding for fire prevention, invasive species management. There's a bill in our ledge right now that would plunk another $15 million on the table. And my observation has been that actually turning those dollars into projects is really hard, because you have to get through all of the permitting, the landowner cooperation. And I guess I'll summarize by saying that in the absence of a locally based collaborative or consortium of interests that have the cuckoo included in their thought process, going back to what Edwin said, it's going to be hard to create projects, restoration projects, and get the dollars for them. Just my 2 cents.
I agree.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Shannon.
Looks like Diane had her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Go ahead, Diane.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently I'm very opinionated, so maybe I shouldn't be talking, but
Probably not.
I have worked at a lot of sites, you know, and cuckoo sites in Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, California, the San Pedro River, and now we work on the lower Colorado River. And that restoration has been incredible. You know, we had cuckoos nesting in the first year. These trees are, you know, like, you know, 2 or 3 meters high. But the trouble is it ages out pretty quick. It's like it's on super growth. These things grow super fast, and the nesting and the population seems to plummet. So if we do restoration, I think that you need to put in, you know, that you have adaptive management over the years, you know. Also, you know, if you go to Sacramento and I've also looked at cuckoos in Colorado, you go to Sacramento and that habitat is amazing. Why aren't there cuckoos there? You know, it's because, you know, the numbers are plummeting. So I really think a lot of the money should be going towards protecting the habitat in, you know, Paraguay, Argentina, and Bolivia. That's it.
Thank you for your opinions. Just kidding. Yeah, it's hard to fund restoration where you say, and it has to keep turning over, and so you have to keep working on it and not just plant the trees and walk away. I agree.
All right, any other questions for Shannon? Just a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So we're going to take this opportunity to just open the floor for any questions that you might have had that have arisen from you based on any of the updates from subcommittee members, or any questions you had for Kira in the beginning, because we weren't able to get to her for questions. All right, go ahead, Callie.
I saw that Guy had a comment in the chat about the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, and I don't want to put him on the spot or anything. I don't know if he's still on, but I wondered if maybe he might elaborate about how we could prepare for that. I'm like out of the loop. So I'm not sure what that would mean. Or if anyone else in the group wants to suggest how we could maybe.
Actually, I could just read what it says in the database. It says, hopefully this will be passed in the near future. Write to your representatives for support. So we have a letter writing campaign.
This is Guy. I could comment quickly, if y'all can hear me. I was eating my lunch, so I apologize for being off camera. But I don't know a ton other than I hear it discussed a lot. I'm work with the Fish and Wildlife Service in headquarters here And I know that I've been tracking it for quite some time because I work with a grant program that has the Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act program that has a really high match requirement. So I've been curious with such a large program like RAWA, if it came to be with its match requirement, what the impacts of that would be for other federal grant programs with matching requirements. But it has the potential, as I understand it, to be putting, I think it's $1.3 billion into state funding opportunities for doing the subject of the act, recovering America's wildlife. I defer to folks, working in states that are familiar with state wildlife action plans and how that might nexus with RAWA to talk with more authority than I do. I just keep hearing about it. And so as a funder, when I think about opportunities that are on the horizon, it's always to be in front of that wave than behind it. However that may be. That's all.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions for any subcommittee members or Hira or Rob? All right. If not, there's a couple comments I urge everyone to look at in the chat. And if there's no further comments for now, we have a break. Please meet back here at 11:25. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Maybe give everyone a minute to get on. So we're in the second portion of our subcommittee updates, and first up in this portion, which is share. Yeah.
Sorry, my internet cut out exactly there, so I'm assuming I'm going first.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's my fault.
So I do have a short presentation started. Okay, so I hope everyone is seeing the presentation. During the meeting that we had last year, I didn't really talk too much about the range-wide population model that we're working on, so I thought I would go into a little more detail about that here today. One of the main goals of the project I'm currently working on is to try and determine what demographic factors explain regional differences in population trajectories for yellow-billed cuckoos across their range. And so here is just breeding bird survey population trend data for yellow-billed cuckoos. And I think I mentioned this last year. We do see these regions in green where populations are increasing and some stable regions, and then other areas where populations are decreasing. And so we wanted to better understand how demographic vital rates are influencing population dynamics across these different regions. And this part of the project is really being spearheaded by Dr. Clark Rushing at the University of Georgia. We initially kind of envisioned doing this analysis across both the eastern and western range, but as I discussed last meeting a bit, the western cuckoos are not well sampled by some of the data sets we were hoping to use. So in reality, a different approach might be needed to better understand what is driving population dynamics in the West. But for now, we are going to kind of focus on taking this range-wide approach first and hope that we can use what we learned from this approach to better understand what's going on with Western cuckoos. And so this is what we're really actively working on now. The goal is to develop an integrated population model that will measure how survival, which we're going to measure with satellite tags, and productivity, which we're going to measure with maps, how both survival and productivity influence population growth at each of these study regions that we're looking at. To look at population size, we're really going to focus on using breeding bird survey data. And then once we know, hopefully from this model, is when and where populations are limited, we can begin narrowing down what the key factors might be that are driving these limitations. And so right now, Clark and I have been really finalizing the seasonal survival part of the data using the satellite transmitters. And then we'll move on to the rest of the model. The kind of big drawback to this approach for Western populations is that cuckoos aren't well sampled, particularly with breeding bird survey data. And so, I mean, we know this, but we are really hoping that by taking this range-wide approach, we will be able to draw inferences about what might be going on in the Western populations. Now, in terms of doing like a Western focused population model, I think there probably is data out there to do that. So if we don't have, breeding bird survey data or MAPS data to use in the West, what do we have? Well, we have the survey data that we've been talking about, and I think having a cuckoo database, like Kristen was talking about, would be really beneficial to that, so we can see what kind of historical data we're dealing with. But then there's also eBird data that could be really good to use and could be combined with survey data potentially to inform a population model. In terms of productivity, like reproductive data, I think this is unfortunately like kind of the weak spot we have for cuckoos, Western cuckoos. And that's because, we talked about this last meeting, they're really not the easiest species to get this reproductive data. So I think we could use MAP for this data potentially. And Southern Sierra Research Station, they have some really good reproductive data. But it kind of strikes me, and I'm not a modeling expert, that would be the weak spot. But there's also other modeling approaches we could use. We could potentially just do a retrospective analysis linking, population trend data to environmental variables across the annual cycle. We know migratory connectivity and key wintering and migratory stopover areas. So that's another approach that we could use. But if people have other thoughts about a Western focused population model and what data is out there available, I really would love to hear from folks. And that's kind of all I had to talk about, and would be happy to take any questions if there are any. Can exit out.
Perfect. So if anyone would like to, my internet's unstable, sorry. If anyone would like to raise their hand, go ahead, or unmute yourself, or put your question in the chat.
And please feel free to email me if you think of something later or are interested in helping out with this project.
Great. Looks like Jenna said, very nice. Thank you. Perfect.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you, Callie. I think we'll move on then. Okay, next up is Mary Whitfield's with bird genoscapes for cuckoos.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, mine's going to be brief. There's not much to say. Right now, I talked to Kristen Rugg, and right now we're waiting to get some blood samples from some researcher, and then that's basically there's a bunch that were taken throughout the West and other areas. And as soon as we have those, she'll be able to look at what is available and what more they need for the Genoscape project. But they're very interested in doing that. And then we can, once they kind of have an idea of what's needed, then they can start getting an idea of how much they'll need to build a Genoscape. But meanwhile, I encourage everybody to, if you're capturing cuckoos, to please send your feathers to the Bird Genoscape project. I will paste Kristen's email address in the chat, and that's who you would talk to about that. But we would especially like cuckoo feathers from the wintering grounds or migration in Latin America, anything like that would be great for tying those Western and Eastern populations to their breeding grounds. And that's it.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, here is asking, can we send the bird genoscape project contact info out the listserv?
Yes, yeah, I could do that. Yep, that sounds like a good idea.
Perfect. Any other questions? Let me check if I'm seeing any hands raised. Some clapping, great. Awesome, thank you so much, Mary.
Sure.
All right, so our next update is from Linnea Hall, which I think is being covered by Bruce Orr and Hero Walker, from what I heard.
Bruce, are you there?
There we go. I couldn't get access. Yes, so Linnea had a family issue today she had to deal with, so she asked me to just give a brief summary. She gave me an overview of what she had planned to talk about. She's been focusing on literature review for potential pesticide effects on cuckoos, and then so she has a cuckoo relevant pesticide info spreadsheet. She's started, I think her intent is to share that with the group via a Google Doc approach. So we can follow up with that, I think, via the list server. And then the research she herself has been focusing on with her colleague Renee Corrado at the Western Foundation of Vertebrate Zoology is looking into their historical collections of yellow-billed cuckoo egg sets from the 1880s through the early 1940s. And they have 85 egg sets. And these, she wanted to make sure everyone knew these data are available for use by researchers. They just ask that you cite the archives of the Western Foundation of Vertebrate Zoology when you're using them for your publications. And Linnea and Renee are systematically measuring the thickness of Western eggshell samples from decades prior to pesticide use, and then comparing them with more recent samples from 2018 through 2021 that were collected by Diane Tracy and Shannon McNeil on the lower Colorado River. They provided those eggs to be archived at the museum. So it's a nice comparative data set. And Linnea says by the end of the summer, she and Renee should have all the eggshells measured. In addition, she's also waiting for test results from the egg contents of recent eggs from the lower Colorado River that were sent to the California APHIS lab for pesticide analysis. And she also hopes to get that pesticide report by this summer. And those whole eggs with contents were also collected by Diane and Shannon on the lower Colorado River and their crews. So I think that's the main summary. I think Linnea is definitely interested in seeking out any other people that want to help collaborate on the pesticide literature review. And certainly if you have interest in working with egg and nest collections, please let her know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions?
Well, I'd like to add, this is here, I'd just like to add that, so some of these documents that Linnea is working on, they're in an Excel spreadsheet format, and we are going to be sharing that out to the working group, and it will be up on the website. I didn't see if, Bruce, did you share your screen? Because all I see is Mary Whitfield on my screen.
No, I haven't tried sharing that. If we want to. if you've got it up, or I can try sharing just to show the.
I think, there's some, I see, that we have this spreadsheet that she created.
Yeah,
With some
that's for
information.
the 85 egg sets that they have in their museum archives.
Okay, and then we also have another spreadsheet too that she wanted to share. Let's see if I can find.
Yeah, I think if you're pulling up that other one, so that's the pesticide literature. So she's just right now showing the citations of what she's uncovered, and then links if she has them available. And I think she's got something like 35 to 40 documents listed so far.
So yeah, we'll be sharing this out. She asked that we share this out with the group, and so I'll do that later.
Thank you for that. We do have a
Great.
hand raised from Shannon this time, actually. Go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to, thanks a lot for doing this, Bruce. Yeah, thanks to Linnea. I just wanted to point out, in case anyone was worried, that we were not collecting eggs, like whole eggs from active nests or anything. We were collecting them later, like from abandoned nests, basically, or from eggs that just never hatched, and then the nest is either failed or fledged. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Shannon. I think it's important.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so we have a couple questions coming in the chat from Murrelet. Is this including the work by Stephen Lehman?
Well, let's see. Is it? We may have to just archive that one unless I can see something in the Google Doc.
Follow up to that while you're looking for that. She said, just curious if that was compatible with this current effort.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So she has a couple layman documents, older documents cited, but is this the more recent work? In which case, she may not be aware of it.
Older.
Okay. Let's see. So I think I'm seeing like row 7 and 8 has some layman articles, but
Sweet, thank you. Any other questions? Perfect, awesome. Thank you so much, Bruce, for doing this.
you're welcome.
Next up, we have Patti Wohner. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Patti, and I will just.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. This isn't a presentation, but it's just the proposal that was submitted. So can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. So in the fall, we kind of had the idea to present some of the presentations that were presented at that fall meeting. We had a lot of really good presentations. And so in December, I put together a proposal that we submitted originally to Avian Conservation and Ecology. And that initial proposal got rejected. But they did say that if any of the authors wanted to submit individually to that journal, that they could. So then a while back now, like January 31st, I submitted another proposal to ornithology or to ornithological applications. And I didn't hear back from them for a really long time. And I actually just heard back from them yesterday, but they said that they are working out details and that they would follow up shortly. So unfortunately, that shortly hasn't arrived before this meeting. So I don't know whether ornithology is going to accept it or not, but kind of sounds promising, that maybe they'll accept the proposal since they're working on details instead of just a rejection. So we're gonna have to stay tuned for a little bit longer about that. I think that'd be so wonderful if they wanted to have our proposal. There's 8 talks that will be in it. And I was gonna just mention that if other people are interested in, if this gets accepted and they're amenable to having other papers, that once I let you know, you can contact me, or I'll contact the working group and see if other people would like to submit any papers, because it'd probably be a really good outlet. So that's basically the update for that. Unfortunately, I just didn't hear back right in time to say yes or no. But if this doesn't get accepted, then if the authors of the papers are wanting to, I can look for other resources or other places to submit a proposal to. So I can take any questions.
Great, awesome. No questions in the chat right now, but if anyone wants to mute themselves, go right ahead. Based on past experiences, let's just give it a second.
Sure.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Patti.
No trouble.
All right, so our next update is from C.Wise. Kathy, you should have co-host abilities, so share or just unmute yourself.
It's actually Edwin and I are going to be presenting, but Edwin's going to go first.
Okay, so good to know. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, we didn't update the host with our change of
No, you're
plans.
good. Let me find Edwin really quick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Edwin Juarez. I'm with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and I'm going to briefly talk about Southern Wings and our idea of pursuing some funding through that mechanism to address some of the monitoring needs or information gaps in the Gran Chaco. But briefly, I'm just going to talk about how Southern Wings works, just to provide some context, and then Callie would dive into a little more of the specific details regarding our ideas for the Gran Chaco. So Southern Wings is a program of AFWA, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and it's designed to promote or facilitate participation of U.S. states in projects or implementing projects south of the border that benefit our species of greatest conservation needs. Each state has an STCN list of priority species. So currently there's over 30 projects throughout Latin America that are being implemented in partnership with in-country partners and also with funding from Southern Wings and other partners. And so it doesn't work. It doesn't operate as a traditional granting program. It's really more of a mechanism where an interested state that wants to either develop a project, in Latin America, or is looking for an opportunity to partner with with someone in a particular country where we know there are migratory species or wintering, that that state can engage those partners and provide funding to benefit those wintering species in Latin America. So, for example, Arizona has a project in El Salvador working on conserving tropical deciduous forests for migratory birds. And there's several objectives to that project, but it also includes some work with the Yellow-Billed Cuckoos. And so Arizona provides a little bit of funding to the partner in El Salvador to fund some of that work. And so the idea today for what we're going to talk about is how can we work through that mechanism to engage other states to see if, how can we channel some of those state fundings for a project that would address cuckoo conservation in the Gran Chaco. I brought up this conceptual project to the Southern Wings Committee, and a couple of the folks from other states were interested in hearing more about this project. And one of the recommendations from that conversation was that it would be good to broaden the focus beyond yellow-billed cuckoos, because obviously there's other migratory species that are wintering in that area. And so I think the thought was that that would perhaps bring in, spark the interest of other states that may not have cuckoos or may not, eastern states, and so that they have, other migratory birds are a priority on their species of greatest conservation need. And so that may facilitate, ideally, the pooling of resources where it would be more of a multi-species conservation project, and cuckoos would be one of those focused species. And so that's kind of the big picture, and I'll pass it off to Callie to talk a little more about the project.
So yeah, we discussed potentially having this Southern Wings, conservation type project. But when we had our meeting, we also realized that we really don't have very much information about what conservation would look like for cuckoos in the Gran Chaco. And I think Rob touched on this a bit. So we talked about maybe first trying to see if, I'm just trying to share my screen. If first, maybe we need to get some more information about cuckoos in the Chaco. And so if we wanted to do kind of like evidence-based management for cuckoos, we really need just to fill in some major information gaps about what cuckoos need in that area. Like Rob was saying, the Gran Chaco is really huge. I think in total, it's like over 1 million kilometers square. And even within the Chaco, there's a lot of diversity of habitat types. And so figuring out where best to spend the money, just, in the Gran Chaco, but also just, what types of habitats would be best to conserve. We really don't have information about that. And so one thought the group had would be seeing if we could raise money to conduct, some preliminary research in the Gran Chaco to get a better sense for what cuckoo requirements are in the area. And so one idea we had was to do roadside surveys in the Gran Chaco to fill in these gaps. And so we kind of came up with 3 main objectives that we'd have for that type of survey would be to identify key wintering regions for the western subspecies of yellow-billed cuckoos, establish what the critical habitat requirements are for the species, and then test the efficacy of different monitoring techniques. Our roadside survey is really a realistic way of monitoring cuckoos. As Rob kind of mentioned, cuckoos are constantly moving in this region. And so you might show up and there's no birds there one day, but then the very next day there's hundreds. And so how well, figuring out what techniques would be the best to monitor them would also be a benefit. And so the idea would be to work with local researchers and groups in the Gran Chaco to develop this project and work on it. From previous grants I've put together looking at work in the Chaco, I think we could do this for relatively little money, $6,000 to $10,000. And I think that range really just depends on what geographic scope we want to cover. The tracking data that we've collected so far with satellite transmitters really suggests that Argentina is kind of the area where Western cuckoos spend the most time. However, they are, especially early in the winter, they are found in Paraguay, especially that border region between Argentina and Paraguay. So, I think the scope will really determine somewhat the cost. But really our biggest, question is, where to get funding for this type of smaller project. So if people had any thoughts as to where we could maybe reach out to money, we've put together kind of a little paragraph describing this project, which we'll send around to the working group. to see if people have ideas, but whether, there's ways to target state agencies or, local birding or wildlife groups. We'd love to hear people's ideas about that. And that's kind of it. I'll stop my share.
Thanks,
If anyone
Callie.
has, people have thoughts.
I want to add a little bit also is that as Callie was saying, this is kind of we want to address some information gaps that may be relatively inexpensive, in comparison to a broader conservation project. But our thinking is that this kind of understanding, what protocol might work best for these birds that seem to be moving a lot, as she just said, would serve as a good foundation for us to start gathering, for our partners to start gathering distribution information locally that will then tear up to, what's going on in those habitats, what might be the opportunities to partner with ranchers or landowners. So we see this Southern Wings project, or as a way to kind of build up our understanding of those areas and movement of those birds locally, and then perhaps use that information, build those partnerships on the ground that will allow us to pursue more significant funding to start addressing the habitat needs for that species, and obviously for the resident birds too that would benefit from that kind of habitat conservation work.
Great, thank you, Edwin and Callie. Are there any questions from the working group?
I did see in the comments that there's some questions about ARUs or comments about ARUs. And I think that is something, it's definitely something we've thought about. Gira Paraguay actually has some ARUs out in one of their protected areas. The problem potentially with ARUs is the fact that birds are moving around a lot. So, ARUs are kind of stationary, though I guess you could in theory move them around. But also my biggest question mark, and I think it's something that needs to be tested out, is whether they vocalize enough for that to be useful in the wintering grounds. But definitely something we're thinking about.
Great, thank you. And there's another question in the chat from Hira, which is, can I share your project blurb on our website?
Oh yeah, that's fine. When we send it around, I'll definitely send it to you as well, for sure.
Perfect, awesome. Any other questions from the working group?
And if anybody has any ideas or is interested in maybe exploring some funding, feel free to reach out to any one of us three here, and we can pursue those conversations further.
Great, awesome. So the next subcommittee update is applications of cuckoo habitat model range-wide, which is Jim Hatton, M. Johnson, and J. Holmes. So I think I have everyone except for Jennifer. So whoever is sharing.
Hello. I've turned on my camera. Can you guys see me?
Yes.
And you can hear me. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo model that was developed. Let's see if I can share my screen here real quickly here. Let's see. I share. Let's see how this goes here. PowerPoint. Let me know when you can see the PowerPoint. Oh God.
We cannot yet.
Okay, that's not going well. Okay, trying to share here. Share a PDF. It's Okay. That's not going well. I don't think I'm going to share that screen.
That's fine. Just in case you're missing it, there's the share screen button that is usually bright green at the bottom of the screen. And then, yeah.
I see the share button. I got something weird going on.
Oh,
with
no worries.
Outlook here,
It
but hang,
happens.
just 1 second here. Okay, that's just weird. Hang on 1 second. Okay, let me try sharing something else here. I'm going to try sharing my model of the yellow-billed cuckoo. I'm bringing it up on ArcGIS Online. And when that pops up, I'll attempt to share that screen. Looks like it's coming up now. So this is loading. Let me see if I can share this screen now. Let's see here. So I will share the screen. I see, okay. And I'm seeing these things now. I think I can share more than I thought here. Okay, you might see, first of all, the PDF I was trying to load before. It says it's sharing. Let me know when that comes up.
Yeah, it's up.
Okay. So once again, in 2017, we published a paper on the yellow-billed cuckoo, and we used satellite modeling in order to develop this model. Matt Johnson, Jennifer Holmes, Patrick Shafra, they were my my collaborators on this. So it is published. It is a model that was developed on the lower Colorado River. It did have an accuracy assessment done, but I'm sharing another table here. This is table 3. In that paper, if you download it or if you email me, I can send it to you. But there's 3 models that we tested, but the model that I've put into ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to share with you in a couple minutes, is model 2 right here. Can you guys see that table okay?
I can on my side.
Okay, good. Okay, so and it has just 2 variables in it that we use cloud-based mapping in order to identify potential yellow-billed cuckoo breeding habitat. And one of them is where basically moving windows in GIS look within 120-meter radius of any given site and look at just how dense is the vegetation within 120-meter area using the normalized difference vegetation index and Landsat imagery. Okay, the second variable looks out 480 meters in radius, and it actually calculates the standard deviation in the density of vegetation. Once again, focusing on the normalized difference vegetation index. And that from that, we built a logistic model, a predictive model. So we take that model, then we enter it into a cloud-based mapping application, and we can create a probability map that shows the probability of breeding habitat for the cuckoo. And I'm going to show you one other table here. This is figure 6 from the publication. And what that does, it shows the 3 different models that we did develop and test using real data on the lower Colorado and some of the lower Bill River. And the main take-home point here is that while all the models are a little different, for the most part, they showed that the density of observations of cuckoos did increase as the model probability classes increased. So from a relative sense, when we run the model, we expect that the density of cuckoo observations will increase as the probability class increases. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen now. And I'm going to see if I can share another screen here. The actual model in ArcGIS Online. Let's see if I can see that. PC whiteboard. Kind of a strange. Trying to get this to show up here. Hang on 1 second here. Let's see if that will show up now. Trying to share it.
In my experience, if you select so it's the ArcGIS Inline, right? So if you select that web
Yes.
page and then go directly and leave it up as the web page,
Yes.
and then go to Zoom, that should show it in the selections.
And when you say go to Zoom,
So then you should have a Zoom icon at the bottom of your screen.
oh, is that right? What does a Zoom icon look
It's like a
like?
little, it's like a little
I
blue
see
and
shared
white
screen.
camera. Share screen, that's perfect.
I'll try that again. Just see. Oh, I see it now. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll try share. Okay.
Perfect.
All righty.
It's
And
not
it
up
shows
quite
it
yet.
sharing here.
Yep, it's on.
Okay, you can see it. So this is the ArcGIS Online project that we've developed. Right now, I only have Matt Johnson and Jennifer Holmes as my collaborators on this site. What I was going to do, we were going to make this particular model run. This is from 2020, available to anyone who wants it. If you email us, we'll add you. You have to email us your user name if that's provided when you become an ArcGIS Online user. Like I'm jhatton_USGS. They'll provide you with a username and you have to email that to me, and then I can add you to the site, and then you can have access to this model. So I just want to quickly show you a couple of things about the model. Right now, if you go over to the right and you click on the layer list, it will show you the different layers that are being displayed here. And oh shoot. Okay, guess what? I don't believe this, but I have the Southwestern Little Flycatcher model. It's very similar, but I'm going to stop sharing this right here. Yes. Okay, I apologize for that. I'm bringing up the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo now. Jeez. So I do a lot of work with the Southwestern Little Flycatcher and the Department of Agriculture. They fund me annually to run the model. So I do a lot of that, but I'm now bringing up the cuckoo model here. It's come up on my end, and let's see if I can share it here. Share the screen. Okay, try again here. Try sharing the screen one more time. Share the screen. Okay, I see it. Okay, and we'll share it. Okay, so it's going to be coming up for you now, the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo model. Let me know when you can see the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo project, the ArcGIS Online site.
Yes, it is up.
Okay. All right. So this is how it looks when you enter it. This is the default home screen right here. Everything you see in blue are the areas that the model has been applied to. So one thing to consider here is that what we did just to get this jump started for the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo is we've taken the mask that we applied for the Southwestern Little Flycatcher, which is everything in blue, and we've just applied it to the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo model. So this is actually, if you zoom out enough, you'll see the whole range of the Southwestern Willow Flycatcher is what you'll see. So I'm zooming out now so that you can see that. So everywhere in blue, it gets a little hard to see at this scale. we have modeled for the southwestern willow flycatcher. So let's quickly, if you go into your find address or place button up at the upper left, you can zoom into any place within the range and look at the model results. So let's just real quickly go to the Santa Clara River, where the model has been applied. Santa Clara, sorry, bad typing. River in California, and the model has been applied there. Okay. So we're zooming in now. We'll zoom into it. And we'll look at what the model looks like. And then we'll talk about it a little bit. So you can see this, the Santa Clara right here. I'm going to zoom in further, so you can see it a little bit better here. And I'm hoping you guys can see that this working here on your end. So I'm at the Telegraph Road in Santa Paula. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Probably takes, okay, great. Okay, so just using that zoom feature, we're able to zoom into an area of interest to us. And if you go over to the right and you click on the layer list there, it shows you the layers that are being displayed. And there's I only have 2 layers in this ArcGIS Online project right now. It's the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo, and it says top 3. That stands for the top 3 probability classes that I'm showing. So I'm showing class 3, 4, and 5 probability classes. And if you go back to that accuracy assessment table from the publication, it shows an exponential increase in cuckoo territories that you're likely to observe in those classes. And if you go over and you look at your legend icon there, it will show you the 3 probability classes and how they're color coded. So the red is probability class 3, and then blue is probability class 4, and then the little green right in the middle here, it's a little hard to see, that's probability class 5. So we applied this for several years on the Santa Clara River. There's very few yellow-billed cuckoos there, but the ones that were observed were in the higher probability classes. So, and let's just go to one other location real here, because I want to take you to a place that has more cuckoos. I'm going to take you to Fort Thomas, Arizona. See if that pops up for us. Yeah, let's go there. We're zooming in. Okay, and then I'm going to just zoom out a little bit so you can see it a little better, what we're dealing with here. So this is the Fort Thomas area on the Gila River, Upper Gila River in southeast Arizona. You can just see there's quite a lot of predicted habitat in this area here. So anyway, this is available for the entire range of the southwestern willow flycatcher. All those blue areas, the model was applied. If you see nothing, that just means that there was nothing predicted suitable for that area. In general, there's very little class 5 because it's a pretty stingy model. It wants to see the very best to be class 5, but class 4 generally is considered to be a very good probability class to look for cuckoos in. So, and as you move around in this model, you realize that in some areas there's a lot of cuckoo habitat, but in other areas there's just very, very little. So it's a tool that we think can be useful for surveyors to try and identify areas for potential surveys. So you can see here on the Gila River, there's a lot of habitat in the Tres Rios areas. And then below that, it just really peters out to virtually nothing for a long, long stretch. So it is keying in on those vegetation attributes. So once again, if people email me your ArcGIS Online user name, it's like a little, almost like a little email they give you. then I can add you to the project and make this available to you. And basically, we just want to know how useful people think this is. If this is something that people want to go with and expand and utilize, kind of like we're doing with the Southwestern Willow Flycatcher and the work that I do for the Department of Agriculture and APHIS, then we should probably have a talk with Fish and Wildlife Service to see if we can get a little bit of funding to just increase our efforts using this model. But this one we're going to make this run free to everyone, just so you can look at it. And if you want to add, if you want to actually do a little accuracy assessment, that would be great. You can download this layer. I'll enable downloading, so you can download it to ArcGIS online, and then you can overlay the territories for your area and just look to see how they fall out. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen unless there's another location someone wants to look at before I stop sharing. If there is, tell me, I'll put it in the Zoom box. Okay.
Sure.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing.
Perfect. We have a couple of questions for you in the chat. Russ is asking what data inputs were used for this range-wide model, e.g. like
it's all coming from that particular model run comes from Landsat 8. So it was initially developed with Landsat 5. For those of you who are not familiar with that, Landsat 5 ran from 1986 to 2012. It went kaput at the end of 2012. We had one down year where Landsat 7 was up, but it gives faulty, screwed up data. Landsat 8 came out in 2013, but kind of in the fall. So, or I'm sorry, it came out in the spring, but 2012, we missed out there. So now Landsat 8 goes from 2013 to present. So that was used Landsat 8. So it, we run an algorithm, and it actually uses the normalized difference vegetation index to calculate these vegetation metrics at those two scales, 120 meter radius core area, and then a 480 meter bigger area where we look at the standard deviation in the vegetation in that area. And then it feeds that information to a logistic regression model and calculates the probability that it is breeding habitat. And then we just bin the data into those different probability classes, because the model can spit out anywhere from 0 to 99%. But we just bin it into 20% probability classes, and then we put that into the ArcGIS online. And someone said, what year? That was 2020. I just put up 2020 as an example.
Thank you. And we do have,
okay,
go ahead and unmute yourself.
I was just going to clarify. I think Russ was asking what cuckoo detections, observations, where are those from?
Where?
Just the LCR, right?
If you look at the publication, it explains in detail the project, but it was the Lower Colorado and the Lower Bill Will. And we used several years of data there. And there's another very interesting part of the paper that is very underappreciated is we also created a vegetation map model where we actually use standardized vegetation mapping techniques. And then we created a probability model using that. And then we use that to help interpret the satellite model. So that's why we call it a dual modeling approach. It's really pretty interesting if people read the paper to see some of the things that we were able to tease out using this dual modeling approach. But the accuracy was pretty similar between the model where we use plant mapping techniques and using the satellite. So we use the satellite just for convenience, but the models give you different information.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you for clarifying, Jenna. I appreciate
Yes.
that. Okay, so we have a question from Hira. Have you overlapped the flycatcher and cuckoo models to see where the highest probability for both to occur?
Well, definitely have looked at both models. I haven't, what I haven't done is what you just was suggested, I guess, is that a range-wide map from the cuckoo overlay the flycatcher map, and then we pull out the biggest overlap zones. If that's what is being asked, haven't done that, but that would not be difficult to do at all. That would be very simple to do. We just
Yeah,
use
that's
maybe,
exactly what I'm asking, Jim. I'd love to see something like that.
we can definitely do that. I mean, so all my flycatcher work is available as well. It's free. I modeled a flycatcher. I've got a library of that that's provided to the Southwestern Willow Flycatcher community. And so that you could download any one of those layers to your ArcGIS. Then you download to 2020 and overlay that with the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo result, and you would get your answer right away.
Kira, this is Jen, and we've talked about this quite a bit, overlapping, and we probably have funding to do that for the Cliff Gila area in New Mexico.
Great, thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes, but there was someone that did want to see if you still have the web page up. They wanted to see the West Sacramento.
Just 1 second, and let me see. Yeah, I see it up. So hang on a second. Let me see if I can share my screen again and bring it up. So, okay, so it should be coming up here. Let me know when it comes up, and then we'll go to the Sacramento.
Yes, it's up.
Okay, I don't know where we'll go. We'll just go to the Sacramento and then we'll zoom somewhere if you have more specific areas. So let me zoom out for a second.
I think it was West Sacramento.
Okay. West being somewhere down in this area. Let me see. Is this outside of the range of the flycatcher? Let me see. Sorry, I kind of lost. Oh, there's Sacramento River. Hang on a second. Do you have a location in the West Sacramento?
I just meant actually West Sacramento, the city. So you're in the right place. And I'm not sure, maybe Willow Flycatcher, Southwestern Willow Flycatcher doesn't go up that far north.
Well, that would explain it.
Yeah.
So this is a good point. Case in point here is that for convenience and to get the group going, we just used our mask that we use for the Southwestern Willow Flycatcher, and we put the Yellow-Billed Cuckoo model into it. So we would have to develop a, in order to expand the range, we would expand that mask. All the mask does is it helps reduce background satellite noise. There's all sorts of artifacts. There's agriculture and other things that can confuse these modeling efforts. So we buffer these rivers by a certain distance as a starting point. So we would have to create a stream buffer for the entire range of the cuckoo and then import the model into it as a starting point. But then you can refine your masking efforts as time goes on. So, but yeah, I don't see it there.
Cool. So one more addition. While you have this up, can you zoom to the middle Rio Grande, say around Albuquerque?
Yes. How do you spell Albuquerque? That's a tough. Oh, I see it. Okay.
ALBU.
I can never get that one right. Okay, so here's Albuquerque. and we're zooming in, and there's, there's quite a lot. I mean, wherever you want to go, you can look. So if you had detections, you could certainly overlay them and see how they fit. If you do an accuracy assessment, the best way to do it is to kind of clip out a reach of river where your detections are observed. And then what you do is you imprint using GIS the detections with the probability class. And then if you divide the number of territories by the number of cells in each probability class, that will give you the density per probability class. So in general, we expect that if you have a large enough area, that those statistical relationships will still play out. The density will increase in the higher probability classes.
All right, thank you. I think that's it for the questions.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yes.
Perfect. So I believe, yep, we're just right on time. That's awesome. So our next presenter is Jay Carlisle. I think I might have forgotten to co-host you. Give me a second. There you go.
All right, I'll work on sharing my screen here. Okay, hopefully that's showing up for folks. Okay, so I know I'm the one between you and lunch, but I'm hoping that we can take this time to add some names to an action plan table that Hira has created that was based on our discussions at the November symposium. That it's hard for me to believe that was already almost 4 months ago, but as many of you will remember, we had great turnout. I think over 100 people that joined that meeting, and lots of great talks and lots of great discussions that led to a whole bunch of information. And I know I already sung Hira's praises earlier, but when you'll see this action plan table that she pulled together, and I mean, it seemed like she just did it overnight, but I'm sure it took a few days to plug all these ideas into an organized document to help us track the steering or the subcommittees and the action plans that were suggested during the November meeting. And Hira already gave a bit of an overview regarding the different subcommittees that I've shown here. So research and monitoring, recovery and planning, grants, fundraising, restoration, and co-production. And my goal here, while we have tons of experts and folks interested in cuckoos and restoration and their conservation, is to show this living document and see if I can recruit folks to sign up for topics that interest them. And so that will include both seeing if we could find folks that would be interested in leading at sort of a higher level, at a subcommittee level, say somebody who's really interested in research and monitoring that could agree to be part of a co-leadership team for that subcommittee, and then also sort of help coordinate efforts within that. And you'll see there are a bunch of different topics within research and monitoring. So that's kind of the basic idea, is to really capitalize on the momentum from the November symposium, use this as a living document, and continue to update it. And I will say this is not exhaustive. So this list is what we came up with at the fall meeting, but it probably has some gaps. And so we also hope to add some new ideas. I'll just mention quickly, there's a section of this that's focused directly on the steering committee. And I'm not including that here just because we don't really need to get into that. I don't think, not that we're trying to hide anything, but just for efficient use of time. And so I think what I'll do is just mention, so basically the next 20 minutes to half hour before lunch will be just going through this document. And what I'm going to do is stop screen sharing my PowerPoint and then grab the link to the Google Doc, put it in the chat so folks can open it on their own computers. Now, I understand that some folks and agencies don't have permissions to be able to open Google Docs. And so my hope is that we'll be able to, via comments on the Zoom or through reaching out to me, that I can plug names in. So maybe what I'll do is I'll plug the, let me stop the sharing before I forget to do that. Is I will plug the my email address as well, so that you can reach out to me. Okay, so first I'm going to grab this Google Doc and add it into the chat. Make sure it sends to everybody. And so those of you that are able to access this, that would be great. I'll type my email in. So folks that are unable to access Google Docs, but are able to see my screen and have ideas can either, okay, so let's see if this is going to work. Okay, so I've asked it to share, and Kristen, if present to a meeting. It looks like it's not showing up. So if anybody has a suggestion for how to get a live web page showing and shared, I would welcome that.
It takes a minute for Zoom to recognize it. So you might want to close your share screen and try again.
Okay, try that again.
Currently, right now, we are seeing the document.
You are? Okay, good.
Yes.
I just don't. Okay, fantastic. Well, I see it on my other screen. I just don't see it on the Zoom.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so am I at the top of the document where it says working action plan table 6 March 2022?
You are indeed.
Fantastic. All right. I've succeeded in at least part of my day. So I'm going to just maybe scroll through this slowly is my idea. But again, if you've seen it in the chat and you want to open this and explore on your own, I think that would be even more effective. Let me see if I can up the view to make this a little bit bigger. Does that look better for folks? A little bit larger font?
A little, yeah, that it's definitely bigger. If you wanted to go a little bit bigger, that might be helpful.
Okay, let us try that.
Perfect.
Hey Jay, is there a way you can share the link instead of share to certain people? And maybe, because I can't access it, it says I need permission.
Oh, I see, yes. Where is the sharing?
I think up above, if you scroll up, there was a spot that said share. I don't know what happened to it, right there.
Yes.
And oh, no.
And I think you have to actually give permission to people on the document.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
So you can share the link.
Yep. Let's see. So this is just showing, right, because I've sent this to Hira and Jenna, but is there a way to do this? Viewers. I apologize for not working this out ahead of time. But I guess I welcome ideas on how I can solve this quickly. Otherwise, maybe we work through this viewing my screen and then I can work on the sharing over lunch.
I can help you over lunch, but it's a little bit more complicated than a quick solve. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So my apologies to all of you that that wasn't a solution. So let me work through this then. So like I mentioned, back in November, we generated a ton of ideas, and Hira's done a great effort to organize this into a Word document that I uploaded into Google Docs with the hope that it would be easy like this. And we've already identified people or the working group, so that's what this WG stands for, in that column, responsible individuals. And so the goal here is to, as you'll see on the left under subcommittee, is to see if we can identify maybe 2 or more people that would be interested in serving as a subcommittee co-lead, just to sort of help maintain momentum on some of these topics or identifying other topics that aren't already highlighted here. Obviously, there's room to edit any of the language shown here, but then also identify who are the folks that are already working on something like this or might be interested in helping to move something along. And so just for example, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but the one pager that I presented about a couple of hours ago, that's one of our action items here that we've been sort of moving along, and fortunately we found a bunch of people that were interested in moving that forward. One thing I'll point out here in case Diane and Shannon are wondering why they're in red font and highlighted is that I know that SSRS and these two in particular have done a bunch of banding, and so I just wondered, it seemed like it might be a logical fit, but I didn't want to shoehorn them in without asking for permission. So this is just me brainstorming. Who else might we recruit to help with some of these efforts? So I think since we've had it on here for a little bit, I might scroll down to the next slate of topics. And I would definitely welcome, and I'll try to keep monitoring the chat in case ideas come up, but I would say feel free to, Kristen, at your permission, unmute and ask questions as I'm going. If you see something you want to ask a question about, or maybe especially right into the chat if you have interest in joining a certain topic, or at least we'll figure out the sharing so that after lunch you can go do it yourself. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a bit to starting on researching threats to cuckoos. So we've already heard Linnea has been pulling together some of this information, but you can see there are places where there are gaps. So there are spots where the responsible individuals box is not filled in. And again, we have something like 80 people on this call, many of which have expertise in some of these areas. And I'll say, we are all busy with our day jobs, and I know sometimes it can be a challenge to volunteer for something extra. And so the hope is that this can be something that's synergistic with efforts that you and others might already have ongoing. So again, we're still in research and monitoring. And I've got another one where I've got Nick highlighted here as somebody who's spent a lot of time working with ARUs and trying to process the data. Is he somebody that could be part of a team for continuing to formalize how best to use ARUs in looking at yellow-billed cuckoos? Okay, I see Shannon has a comment about having done a basic survival analysis on the LCR data. So that's great. Might be fun to hear more about. Nick says yes. Okay, good. So my highlight worked. My peer pressure system is working so far. And I'm just going to keep scrolling, and we'll get into recovering and planning. I'm just seeing the bottom idea within research and monitoring is continuing to publish scientific findings, and the special session that Patti has been researching. And I see that Hira is in the background cleaning things up here. Thanks very much. Okay, so recovering and planning. Now this is where I was bold, and I suggested, based on interest that I know Jenna has, and the fact that Kristen's name is all over the place within this topic, that Kristen and Jenna could be appropriate co-leads for this subcommittee. But I have a question mark there, because this is not an assignment. This is just a, hey, would this make sense? So we've got promoting data sharing, promoting actions that address primary limiting factors, a restoration meta-analysis, so assessing effectiveness of restoration effort, assessing successes and failures, et cetera. So these are just some ideas that are there. And let's see, what does the chat say? Shannon's laughing at me. Okay. And then grants and fundraising. This is a relatively short topic, and we've talked about this some today, but finding funding sources for a variety of topics, including helping fund the coordinator position to make sure that this could be something that we could sustain long-term. Because I think as much as Hira has been able to dedicate a bunch of time in the last 4 months, I'm assuming that we would reach a state of burnout with Hira if we aren't able to find some support for that, whether it's her or somebody else going forward. But she's done a ton of work, and I think it would be great to be able to maintain that going forward, at least in a part-time level. So there's my little shameless plug to see if we can come up with ways to fund that, but also continue funding survey efforts, coordinated surveys across the range. I think it's amazing that folks were able to get the competitive SWIG grant to do this range-wide survey in 2022. And we've talked about this before, but what we really need is to be able to do that for multiple years and really get a sense of how dynamic these populations are. And maybe I'm biased, but being in a place like Idaho where we have some bigger years and then some smaller years, be nice to know how that fits within the greater population cycle. And I will say I added in a few notes over on the right, including, Guy's comment earlier about getting prepared for RAWA, because this could be a great way to apply for some funding that would benefit the Western DPS. And then getting into restoration. So we've talked about this one-pager idea. And I would definitely welcome more help with this. Some of the ideas that I've heard today are really helpful, and I'm definitely going to hope that we can get some more input on that as well. Okay, Kristen caves to peer pressure as well. That's awesome. And then here's an idea that I cannot remember where this comment came from, but a specific area that's slated for restoration along the lower Colorado. And so maybe reaching out to Jeff Hill or other colleagues with that effort. And so other topics here. So Bruce, who we've already heard from today, has already put his name into a few of these. And then there's this last topic of co-production, and this is where we're really seeking benefits for the bird, for habitat, for the agencies, but also any other folks that are living and working in these areas. And I know Hira already defined co-production for us earlier. And we've heard about a couple of these topics in presentations today, including from Jenna, from Edwin, with ideas for this. So maybe I'll just leave it here for a second. And I think we're getting near the end of the document, just to give you a sense. Let's see. Bruce has a comment in the chat about working with River's Edge West to connect with local restoration efforts that would be relevant to cuckoos. Okay, I'm gonna move down to the next page, just getting down towards the bottom of the document. So again, within co-production, facilitating communication among partners and stakeholders, supporting landowners, small businesses, and local communities. So these are some of the ideas within co-production. How do we make this sustainable and maybe not just the big arm of the government coming down on folks? That's oversimplifying, and I say that with great appreciation for all of my government employee friends. Okay, another suggestion about a partner or the Gila Watershed Partnership. Okay. And there's a comment on the citizen science opportunities that Kristen had commented on an earlier version of this document. Just, I think this might be something where we need to have a conversation about the best role for community scientists, given the need, the sensitivity of the species, the need for a permit for being able to do the playback surveys, et cetera. It's not as easy of a species, I think, to weave in community scientists, but I think there's probably room for that as well, whether it's eBird or other sources. So, okay, so I've slowly enough navigated through this Google Doc just to give you a sense for what we're hoping to accomplish. And I guess I would open it up to any questions or suggestions or ideas. Maybe I'll scroll back to the top and maybe seek volunteers to see if anybody has thoughts or interest in either taking a co-lead position with one of the subcommittees, has ideas for additional action items within some of these subcommittees, and or either want to agree yourself or nominate somebody else to be a responsible individual in some of these action items.
You do have a couple comments in the chat. Here is suggested maybe on the wintering grounds, citizens science.
Right, like if surveys, like what Rob described about transects through the Gran Chaco habitat and being able to see cuckoos relatively easily, that's an area where maybe you don't need any kind of a permit for doing those surveys. You don't need to use playback, or maybe you could, but that might be a way to help gather more data there.
I think the one problem with citizen science in the Gran Chaco, and it would be great, is just like the eBird data, there's not a lot of birders up there. So figuring out who we're gonna ask to do that would be the problem, I guess.
Right.
The hill to climb.
Okay, so you do have a lengthy comment from Gus in the chat. I did reach out to Sean Sawville about Rawa. And shared with me that they already begun producing 1 to 2 pagers. Yeah. I didn't know who is building those products, but conceptually it seems like the approach Virginia Seamster commented about would contribute to a product like that of some sort. Not sure how to share an example. I could email it.
Yeah, no, I think both Guy and Virginia, I think those are good ideas, and whether it's something similar to this 1-pager we've developed for restoration, or what Kira's already developed as far as priority research topics for cuckoos. I could see us already having or being close to having some sort of summarized documents that might be helpful in trying to secure collaboration across states to make something like that happen.
Bruce Orr suggested Rivers Edge West. They work closely with various groups, including Gila Watershed Partnership and others. And he linked in the chat. And then Diane says she can research some Chaco partners. And that's all I'm seeing in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, and I see Guy shared an example of a New Mexico shovel-ready project. So, good. Well, not being able to share the Google Doc kind of puts a little monkey wrench in my plans for the next 15 minutes, but I guess I would say I'm happy to linger for a little while before we break for lunch. See if folks have other questions. But if not, I would work over the early part of the lunch hour to get this shareable so that everybody can get to it. And then we could maybe come back.
I could probably walk you through it really quickly. If you have the capability to do it. So if you click that share button again at the very top.
Yeah.
You should. So there should be, if you click that, can you click the share with Boise University?
Copy the link.
No, see the viewer?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's no.
Yeah.
No, it's a little bit more complicated then, so never mind.
Okay.
Jay, I'd just like to interject. I just want to interject a reiteration of something that you said earlier, which is that we're hoping that we're capturing also what folks are already working on. And so that, we're hoping that we can find leads on some of these action items for those people who are already working on those action items. And we're just trying to capture it in the action plan. Is that clear? I just feel like I actually muddied the waters a little bit. But, if you're already working on some of this stuff, we're not necessarily asking you to do additional work. We're putting you down as a lead, as someone who could then talk about it, share with the working group, et cetera.
All right, perfect. So if there's no other questions, Jay, if you want to stay on, I think I can work it through. I just don't want to take up everyone's time trying to troubleshoot.
Okay, I see a comment from Adam to maybe help guide us through that. But I think
Perfect.
if that works for folks, I think maybe that makes the most sense. So you guys don't have to watch me struggle through it for another few minutes. And then we can just come back, I think at 1:45 to maybe have a few more minutes to add this in. And I can, as soon as we get it shareable, I'll add it in case folks are working over lunch and want to start going in and adding their name. But feel free to make some edits and enjoy some lunch. And then maybe I'll let Kristen or Hira say any parting comments.
No, I think that's it. Have a great lunch, everybody.
Hey, Jay, could I actually just ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I apologize if you already covered this. I've kind of been bouncing back and forth between meetings all day, but I was wondering what are you seeing as the role of the subcommittee leads compared to just, whatever you were already doing within the subcommittee?
I think just to sort of maybe help, and maybe Hira can jump in if she's on, but I think given that it's voluntary, the role that Hira has been playing as coordinator, and she's done the lion's share of the work over the last few months, but all of us on the steering committee are also putting in some effort that is often relates to our work, but might be sometimes outside, is just to sort of share the load a little bit and make sure that somebody could be sort of helping keep tabs on individual action items, but also helping evolve this over time and being like, okay, well, we check these things off. What are some new questions that we would want to ask that would be conservation relevant or whatever else? So that's my quick answer, but let's see what Hira says.
Yes, I agree with Jay. I'm thinking about the fact that we have a steering committee that's really going to be addressing the workings of the working group and, how we address collaboration, co-production, and some of these broader topics, funding, just on general broader topics and where we see the working group going next. Then what I see is that there'll be leads for subcommittees, and they'll be the ones that will really be like reaching out to folks who are leads on, the different tasks. And they'll kind of be keeping tabs on them and saying, sending them little messages and saying, hey, what's the status with this work? And, hey, instead of, me sending it out to all of the different people that are working on these different projects, we would have this broken up into subcommittees, and the subcommittee leads would be responsible for doing that for the work that's going on within their subcommittee. And then they'd get that information to me. I'd report back to the steering committee. We'd report out about this at the meetings. And, and also that they would, generate some ideas about what other goals we might have, objectives, tasks within each of those subcommittees that should be added into that action plan. And so I'm hoping that they'll kind of help generate some of that and also try to help identify some leads in the future. Is that clear?
Yes, absolutely. I love this. Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. Since I let Jay volunteer me to lead, I figured I better find out what I just agreed to.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that we need to kind of, sorry, my kids are home for lunch.
It's okay, don't worry.
So this is something that we need to think about too, is, as I was mentioning, are we going to have like term limits, and how are we going to kind of establish how long we're going to have these leads? And Jenna and I talked about this a little bit. We kind of see steering committee leads as being more in flux than steering committee members. Those would be, maybe a 2-year sort of term, but we're kind of letting folks kind of come in and out of the steering committees as leads, because we know, other things kind of come up. And so we'd like to have some consistency, like hopefully a year's worth of commitment, kind of do this work and then kind of help the next person that comes along, let them know what's going on and overlap with them a little bit and have that transition and move on to someone else. But this is not something that I'm saying, okay, now you're going to be the lead for that steering committee, indefinitely. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but so it's something that we kind of see as something's more free flowing than, let's say, the membership of the steering committee.
Okay, sounds good. Great idea. I love this.
I'll mention, I just added in the chat, I think I figured it out thanks to Adam's suggestion. So it's now a few comments deep, but Jenna messaged that she was able to access the Google Doc now. So anybody who's listening, feel free to go play around, and I think we'll see you back here at 1:45. So Kristen, thanks for the offer to help, but thankfully Adam's comments helped me solve it. Appreciate everybody's patience.
Yeah, I'm able to access that too. Awesome. Good. Thank you.
You can see my embarrassed faced emoji that's in real life. Okay, enjoy lunch. I'll see you guys in a while.
I wasn't able to edit. I can access, but I can't edit.
You have
to. Okay, so I think I see Callie's adding her name, which is great. So this is kind of what I was hoping would happen, is that we could have this accessible to everybody. People could feel free to insert some names into spots, even if you wanted to add an objective or action item within an area, add that as a suggestion. That sounds great. And maybe in the next 12 minutes or so, we can just work through this, and I can be here to answer questions. Here, Jenna, other folks in the steering committee could also help. I guess maybe I'll just ask, are there folks who are unable to access the document on their own that would want me to scroll to a different section, or anybody would like a little bit more context for this that maybe might have missed that earlier? All right, link is shared again. I guess maybe as people are rejoining after the lunch break, we might have to reshare that a few times over the next 10 minutes. Thanks, Jenna. So for folks that are rejoining, we've got 10 minutes or so until the next agenda item, and this is time to review the working action plan table in that Google Doc. The link actually works now. Well, the link worked, just I hadn't set up the sharing. So see my embarrassed faced emoji going on. And just if people have questions or ideas they want to discuss related to this, otherwise people can access the Google Doc and insert names or even suggestions of folks that, you know, just like I did, I threw out a couple of names and put people on the spot. So I think that's allowed. Maybe just make it clear if you're putting somebody else's name in that it's a suggestion, not a firm decision. And Edwin's asking, yeah, can action items be tweaked? Yes. And this, I think Hira could also speak to this, but this was really trying to condense language into as brief of a description as possible. But the whole idea is that this is a living document that we can adapt as a working group. And as Hira said in her talk at the beginning, you know, the working group, the website, et cetera, it's meant for everybody who's working on the species to be sort of a democratic process, if you will. So yes, definitely we can add, edit, and then as we complete things, you know, maybe in a year we'll have to sort of move some things down to the bottom of the already completed or something like that. But and then one thing I'll mention quickly, because I think a lot of people had probably already signed off for lunch, but Kristen, after already having agreed to serve as a subcommittee lead, asked Hira and I for some clarification around that. And so maybe I'll just reiterate that as people are pondering, oh, would I want to help out as a subcommittee lead, or just maybe focus on a particular action item? The idea is just that, you know, this is mostly a voluntary process overall, right? Like many of us have jobs where this relates to our work. And so our hope is that we find synergy with all of this. But, you know, especially with Hira having volunteered a ton of her time to make this happen and sort of get us ready for this meeting, you know, the idea behind the subcommittee leads is just to sort of share the load a little bit and have ideally one or two or even more people assigned to say research and monitoring that could help help the steering committee keep tabs on progress or updates within a given subcommittee. But somebody, so for instance, Callie has nicely added her name as a potential co-lead within research and monitoring, and she's already has her name tied to a few action items. And I don't think it has to be both, but it probably makes sense. Okay, so John is asking about accessing this Google Doc at the end of the day. And I guess that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about, like, do we just send this out to the working group as a whole? Maybe I'll ponder that and consult with Hira and other folks in the steering committee about what's the best way to send this out. But, you know, whether it's just send it out to the listserv or send it out to folks that want it in particular. So I'll ponder that, but thanks for the question, John. All right, well, happily watching different comments and edits going into the document, which is exactly what we wanted. If you're watching my shared screen, apologies if I make you dizzy as I scroll a little bit to see what's happening in different places. But, you know, again, some of this is we can address and add some names in the next 6 or 7 minutes, but some of this is just to present the idea and let folks know, hey, this is happening, that we're going to be tracking these and probably actively trying to recruit, because I don't think that we're going to have every open cell within the responsible individuals column filled today. But just to sort of get it on your radar and know, hey, there's opportunities for people to plug in, even if it's just participating in a particular action item or taking on, you know, more of a subcommittee lead role. Okay, yeah, here is saying we can put this document in an official working group folder in a Google Drive for cuckoos as a way to share it so that we can add to it in the future.
Hi, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
This is Shannon. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you can see my comments about the genoscape project. Yeah, we pretty much have all of our LCR cuckoo DNA samples in stored at the University of Arizona, and I need to find some time and help to get them packaged up to Colorado. So that's
right. So your comment about anybody in the Tucson area that might be able to help package that up.
You know what, they could even stay at my house if they weren't in Tucson.
Okay, and a comment from Susan regarding some samples that they have with Fish and Wildlife Service. So
yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we made that connection. Feel free to chime in verbally or in the chat in the next few minutes. But thanks again to everybody for bearing with my sharing issues on the Google Doc pre-lunch, and I'm glad we're making some progress here. And I'm definitely happy to engage on this via email or later today in the Q&A session if it makes sense. Okay, so I see Tracy has a question about establishing a research goal for expanding the Hatton Johnson et al. Model beyond the range of the southwestern willow flycatcher. And I like that idea. And I guess I was wondering if, let's see, I'm trying to remember about the agenda, but I think we're going to hear about the range-wide surveys this summer. And what I don't remember is how much the C-SWIG effort as far as selecting sites, how much that's using similar modeling approaches as that Hatton et al. Model. But I think that's obviously very worthwhile to make sure that people are talking and that we can expand that. Okay, and then Tracy's clarifying the C-SWIG modeling is not based on vegetation, so there's a difference. And then I see Adam has a comment regarding high quality vetting of historical sightings to sort of help increase the accuracy and precision of data sets. And that it has relevance to multiple topics. So I'll ponder that for a moment. Okay, thanks for that, Hira. Entering any other comments into the table. Well, I think I'll just say thanks everybody for bearing with me. Hopefully this is useful, and I appreciate everybody or folks that are adding some names and ideas. And maybe we leave it there to be able to stay on track for the rest of the afternoon. But feel free to reach out if you have other ideas or comments.
It is 2 o'clock now, and we are moving on to cuckoo workshops taking place this year with Jenny Davis. And Jenny, if you're screen sharing, let me just make you a co-host. There you go.
Okay. Oh, you guys totally disappeared. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see anything from the Zoom anymore, but yeah, so I'm going to briefly go over the permits. And I think most of what people are interested in is when we actually have protocol trainings going on. And I try to get the ones that I knew of across the range. So if anybody else has additional ones to add, we can do that at the end. But for the permits, now all of our Fish and Wildlife Service permits are done on e-permits. So you don't have to send in your paper check anymore. You don't have to send in your paper copies. You can actually go on the website and enter your stuff. So for a new permit, it's $100 to put in for a new permit or to add a species, a state, or a new activity. If you're just doing an amendment, which is normally just adding extra personnel, it's $50. If you're from a federal agency and you're going in under your agency, then it doesn't cost anything. For the cuckoo, the requirements we're primarily looking for is that you have attended a approved protocol training within the last 5 years, and you have 40 hours of experience with cuckoos. So that kind of means that if you're taking the protocol training this year and you haven't had any experience yet with the species, you probably won't be able to get your permit approved this year, but we can send you people that are approved that hopefully you can get out in the field and get training, get experience. And so when you put in your application, we're going to look for your resumes. And with your resumes, you should have your certificate that says you attended the protocol training. You should list your experience with cuckoos and with other riparian avian surveys. And I think in the past, not the recent past, but in the past, they've issued permits that's saying that once you attended the protocol that you'd be approved. But the permit staff won't do that anymore. So you have to actually attend the training, get your experience, and then you can apply for your permit. Part of the problem with our permits is that it takes a long time. We normally say 120 calendar days, so get it in, get your applications in as far in advance as you can. The things that'll make it take longer is, well, if it's not complete, if you don't have all your information, the number of species that you have on the permit, the number of states, and the number of Fish and Wildlife Service regions. Because if you turn it in and you turn it in California, but you turn it in for the entire range, then it has to go to the permits coordinator in each of the regions across the range. And then those permit coordinators send it out to the species leads in each of the states. And then they have to wait for all of us to get back and approve and coordinate with each other on the language. And so the simpler it is, the faster it'll get through. And then in addition, busy season like right now, in the next month or two, stuff that's coming in, there's a lot of stuff coming in that we all have to get out and approve.
Jenny, sorry to interrupt. I just want to double check. Are you sharing slides right now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. You'll need to share screen.
It says I am sharing screen.
I can't see it on my side.
Let me try again.
Or put the PowerPoint into the project. I had that issue earlier when I shared. I hit the button, but it didn't quite go. So I had to redo it.
Can you see it now?
We can see we can see it now. Okay. You'll just have to make it full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So just real quick, I'll go back, and here is the link to e-permits. So later on, I'll put that in the chat. And so here, after you get a permit, these are some of the things that are required after you get the permit. So your surveys, you have to follow the protocol guidelines and follow your permit. You have to coordinate with each Ecological Services field office annually before you go out and survey. And that's primarily because we have lots of people going out to survey, and we want to make sure you guys aren't out in the field and hearing each other, making your calls and thinking there's another bird out there. So that's one big thing, is and that we don't get that as much as we should. So this year in particular, because the range-wide surveys are going to be going on, anybody that contacts us at the Ecological Services field offices, we're going to put them back in touch with the folks doing the range-wide surveys. So this year in particular, please make sure you reach out and contact us to let us know where you're going to survey before you survey. So the permits need to be renewed every 5 years. And then if you're making an amendment, you have to put in the amendment, and that's to add new folks, different species, or a different state if you didn't add all the states originally. And then your reports are going to be due to each of the ecological services field offices by October 15th, and that's different than a lot of the other species. Most species, it's by the end of the calendar year, but for cuckoo, we asked for them by October 15th. And so here's the list of trainings that I currently have that I've heard back on. So in New Mexico, we're doing ours June 8th and 9th, and you can reach out to me. In Arizona, it's going to be June 23rd and 24th, and you can sign up at that website. In California, and if anybody on here has updated dates on these, just put it in the chat or let us know. But in California, there's the website for the Southern Sierra Research Workshop. And then in Colorado and Utah, it'll be June 6th and 7th. And you can sign up there. And then Idaho, they don't have a date yet, but Katie was saying mid-June, you can reach out to her. As of right now, I think most of the actual trainings, the class portion is going to be virtual for most of these. I know New Mexico, we're still deciding. But then there'll be field portions for these also. So the field portions will actually be on the field. And I know for ours in New Mexico, we tried to limit it for the field training last year. We'll see who needs stuff this year, but I don't think we'll be limited this year, just based on COVID and that we're outside. And I will take these links and I'll just stick this in the chat so you guys can all access it easier. And so that's it for me.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a couple comments from people about permits regionally, about not forgetting your state permits, and then other logistics around that. So Kira's asking if you have any trainings that you would like to put on the website, please email her. And then a couple of deadlines for permits in other states. Does anyone have any questions? You can also raise your hand if you would like. All right. Thank you so much, Jenny. Okay. The next person we will hear from is Edwin Juarez. He will be speaking about the 2020 range-wide surveys and how you can help.
Thank you. I have a couple slides.
Okay, perfect. I'll co-host you. There you go.
Thank you. You're seeing my full slides now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to provide a brief update of where we are with this project. I think we presented on it last time the group met, so some of this may be repeat information. But the main focus of this update is to identify opportunities for collaborations, and if there's partners interested in helping out through volunteering or to coordinating survey efforts if they're already engaged in cuckoo survey efforts this coming season. So this project is a collaboration of the Pacific Flyway states, Texas, and several NGOs, partners listed on the slide here. And this is an effort that took several tries in terms of applying for funding to CISWIC to receive funding. Initial conversations for this effort started several years ago through Partners Supply Western Working Group. Then it continued through conversation with Pacific Flyway states and some of the other partners that are listed on this slide here. Just to remind folks, this project has three main objectives. One was to develop a DPS-wise fishing distribution model, primarily to help with the sampling framework. second objective is to implement the range-wide cuckoo surveys this coming season, which is what the partnership has been intensively planning for the last few months. And so this would be a collaborative effort of both state and those NGO partners listed in the first slide. And the third objective is to, what we wanted to assess the detection probability and evaluate the effectiveness of using ARU units as an alternative survey method. For these three objectives, the first one, the lead state was Utah. And for the second objective is all those partners within the project partnership. And then for the third objective, as listed here, is California. And so today I'm just gonna primarily focus on our planning and implementation of our range-wide survey effort. So we have developed a DPS model using, we collected and compiled all the available cuckoo location data that we were able to get from Fish and Wildlife Service, state agencies, and other partners. And also using remotely sensed data, we created this model that across the whole range. And the primary purpose of this model as has been created is to help develop the sampling framework so we can conduct the range-wide surveys. And so as I was saying, our objective two is to conduct those surveys. Right now, we're in the process of identifying our sample units that are being randomly selected from the framework, from that model, using a spatially balanced approach and also stratifying accordingly. The three stratas that we're working with right now are historically occupied habitat, which is based on the location data that was compiled across the range. Also incorporating critical habitat, the proposed critical habitat of 2014 and the current version, which is 2020 or 2021, I forget the year. And then the model habitat output from the model that Utah created for the project. And just to give you a sense of the scope, the scale of the survey effort, this is a little bit older table that we put together to help us evaluate the amount of survey effort that we could put in with available funding that was provided. This is just shown here to give you a sense of the number of surveys that we anticipate at a minimum being able to conduct across the range, using the proposed critical habitat as kind of a baseline way to help us, that helped us think about how much effort we would want to allocate across all the states participating in the survey. A couple of those states where you see a zero allocation, that's really not correct. That's just a reflection that although they're part of the project, the 6-week funding does not apply to those two states, but they're still collaborating as part of their range-wide effort. So our goal is to conduct a minimum of 250 surveys across the range, and that survey is defined at what can be survey in one morning in terms of the following the standard protocol. The area that could be surveyed in one morning following the standard protocol. In terms of the implementation, like I said, all the states and NGO partners that were identified at the first slide or working on implementing this project, with Arizona working with SSRS for surveys in Arizona, in Colorado in partnership with the Western Biology, and also in Oregon with KBO, and also SSRS working in Texas to implement those surveys. Again, you can see the rest of how that breaks down here. Utah will be facilitating those surveys in Utah, Washington, and Wyoming through partnership with IBO. And then California is coordinating surveys there and looking for, I believe there's currently a bid out looking for an implementer. And then New Mexico is working with SSRIs for those surveys in New Mexico and so forth. The other 3 states, they're not part of the 6-week funding, but they will be implementing their surveys through in coordination with as part of the partnership. For each of the states where we will be conducting the surveys, there's a state cuckoo project coordinator, and that role of that person or that partner is to look at the sample units once in terms of logistics and access, the kind of typical implementation work planning that needs to happen. Also make sure that the permits are in place, staff resources, or the contract, depending on what approach each state is using to implement the surveys. As I just noted in the previous slide, depending on the state, there's maybe implementing a little bit differently, directly or through a partnership to conduct the surveys. One of the key things that we'll need to ensure is that our sampling sites do not overlap areas that are already being surveyed by other partners. So we want to make sure that we're coordinating that so that we're not surveying the same location for cuckoos. I think this also will present an opportunity to see if sampling unit lands in the same area where another partner is an external partner is conducting a survey, whether that survey effort would be included as part of our overall sampling effort to have a more robust data set, because they would allow us to survey another plot. And so the other role of the state coordinator is to engage folks that may have expressed an interest in helping with surveys. I know that in Arizona, we've had like 2 or 3 folks. I think a couple of entities approached us interested in seeing that where they could participate or assist with surveys. And so I think one of the things we want to highlight here is that if there are folks interested in assisting in terms of conducting surveys, or if there's an entity, a federal partner, or a state partner that may conduct annual surveys as part of their responsibilities, or they're permitted through their agency to conduct surveys, and if there's a desire to conduct some surveys, we can definitely would like to coordinate that so that we could increase the sample size and also coordinate efforts. We're still looking for field technicians. We're in the process of hiring the techs that will be needed for the project, particularly SSRS is still looking for additional technicians, and you can find that information on their website. I also wanted to note that California currently has an invitation for a bid out looking for a contractor to conduct surveys in California and some areas of California. And so the last bullet here is kind of describing just the 3 or 4 different scenarios where somebody in the working group or may be interested in engaging the project in terms of volunteering to assist with a survey, or accompanying a surveyor if that's an interest. I think the main thing here is that if there is an interest from someone, to reach out to us, and then we'll get you in touch with the right person for the area that you may be interested in assisting with. I think that might be my last slide. Yeah. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're in the process of doing our sample draw for the plots, and needing to push those out as quickly as possible. The state partners that are line up to implement the surveys.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question, a couple questions. This is a comment similar to a BBS route. It might be good to have a map of survey sites so folks can volunteer to adopt, quote unquote, a survey site to survey, especially sites that are nearby areas where they are already doing work. And then a question, how can I get a copy of the range-wide model? How can I get location information on where cuckoo will be surveyed in Washington?
That's a good question. Right now, we just completed the model, and it should be available pretty soon. Utah is the lead for that process, and I think part of the work that we're doing right now is taking that model and allocating the sampling effort across those 3 stratas. And so once we have that in place, we'll have that available for the state implementers, and then they would coordinate, with a particular partner that's interested in what areas, for example, in Washington, are being surveyed, and see where there's opportunity for either if somebody wants to do an individual survey, how that would work.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions, or would anyone like to unmute themselves for a question in the working group? Okay. Hira asks, I might have missed this, but I am curious as to why Arizona has a significantly higher number of survey sites than New Mexico.
Let's see. That's for the
Edwin, I can answer that if you want.
Go ahead.
That table was part of the proposal, and the sampling allocation was based on the proportion of critical habitat within each state at that time. And so that distribution of sampling may change. We're working furiously to get this out. We're meeting almost every day in a given week right now. But it's based on the amount of habitat available within a given state.
Thank you. Question from Bruce. Any more information on how the California surveys will be handled? Is it a single contract for coordinator and all surveys within the state?
I'm not sure if Neil Clipperton is on the line right now. He's the lead coordinator for this project in California, so he would be the best person to answer that question.
No.
No, we can definitely share his email in the chat box.
That would be awesome. All right, any other questions? Perfect.
I have one, Edwin.
Oh, yeah.
This is Carrie running MSCP. So are you guys the coordinators gonna reach out to groups like ours that are funding surveys over large areas, just to, if it turns out that plots are randomly selected, say at Cibola National Wildlife Refuge, so that we're not double counting areas? How's that coordination going to happen?
That's an excellent question, and I'll let John answer that.
We are in the process of establishing our sampling, our sample draw, and once those are allocated, our sample units will be ranked accordingly and an overdraft sample developed, at which point state coordinators would start to contact people like yourself about any overlap. Hopefully the state coordinators already know who will be conducting cuckoos within their respective states. I know that's probably not always the case, but.
And so Carolyn, for Arizona, that would be Tracy McCarthy in our office, and also in coordination with John as that sample draw is conducted. We'll reach out to those partners that we know are engaged in survey efforts this year, so that we do that coordination.
Great, thanks. And I guess we'll reach out to John if we don't hear anything by the time the surveys would probably be starting.
Oh no,
Just
you'll
double check.
hear.
Oh, you'll
hear
hear
from us.
Okay. Things can get busy and crazy because there's a lot of people doing stuff. So
It's insane, but we'll reach out to you.
okay, great, thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Our last presentation for the day, or talk for the day, will be Jenna. And Jenna, I believe you're co-hosted already. And then after that, we have a Q&A for the entire working group.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so this presentation probably won't last the full time slotted either as the previous two, so we'll get out early, which is good because at the fall meeting, it was kind of crazy. We didn't even have time for questions, so yeah. But anyway, we just wanted to put this in here because we wanted to have it on the agenda so we can receive feedback from all of you. And we wanted to share some ideas with the working group as a whole for what we're thinking for the fall meeting and for biannual meetings in general for the future. None of what I present today is set in stone, so we can adjust as needed and adapt to topics of interest. And on that note, if you are interested in seeing something in particular discussed, or if you have something you think others would like to hear about and you're willing to present it, please contact Kira at the email listed in the bottom corner of this slide, because we'd love to hear from you. And also, I guess I did want to give a big shout out to Kira. Her website, if you haven't checked it out yet, you should check it out. It is pretty amazing. She's done a lot of work. So thank you, Kira. So moving forward, we're planning to have 2 working group meetings per year, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we'd like to aim for half-day meetings if we can, because that seems to probably fit everyone's schedule a little better. Unless we have some special topics that make the meeting longer than half-day. A few months in advance, we're going to try to pin down a day for the meeting. And then once a day and time are set, we'll send out a save the date to the working group. And after the agenda is finalized, we'll send out the registration information to the working group. We've been discussing that our spring meetings will generally encompass the topics of new improvements to research methods and techniques, such as ARUs or MODIS or other things like that. Trainings and workshops, survey coordination, and brief subcommittee action item updates, like what we kind of did for this meeting, but maybe it'd be the subcommittee leader giving the updates. I don't know how that would actually play out, but anyway, we have a while to figure that out. The fall meeting, we're thinking will generally encompass the topics of new discoveries and updates from the field, what we've learned from research so far, and updates about completed surveys for each state or regional area, maybe. We were just thinking that might be good. And then, of course, any special topics can be incorporated into either meeting. So if you have specific ideas, please share them with the steering committee or email Kira. And I just wanted to quickly mention that collaborating with Peak has been really helpful. The use of their Zoom platform, which can accommodate a really large group, has helped us keep our meetings free of charge without having to worry about like the participant limit and numbers. And they also create a registration page for us and provide us with our absolutely wonderful moderator who helps us stay on track. And additionally, Peak records the meetings and makes them available to us. So collaborating with them has been really beneficial to us. So just wanted to give them a shout out, and please feel free to support them through through a donation if you can, to show your appreciation. I put mine as in the name of Yellow-Billed Cuckoo, because you can put it as a name for someone. Anyway, for the fall 2022 working group meeting, as we touched on in the beginning, the mission of the working group is to bring diverse partners together to promote scientific research and monitoring that contributes to the understanding of the Western Yellow-Billed Cuckoo population distribution, status, trends, and threats that lead to effective recovery actions. So our goal for these meetings is to assist in research cohesiveness and to inform each other about what's going on with cuckoos throughout their range, including in their migratory and non-breeding range. And we hope that these meetings will create opportunities for collaboration for our working group members. So please consider volunteering to give an update about your current research or cuckoo populations for your study area. If we could get updates regionally or even for each state, this would allow all of us to maybe better gauge what's going on throughout the cuckoo's range. And also understanding what other people are learning from research can help us better understand our own research questions and objectives. So if you have something you'd like to present with potential topics, such as non-breeding range, stopover habitat, prey availability, prey sampling techniques, I don't know, restoration, modus, radio telemetry, or any other topics, then we'd love to hear from you. So we'd also like to know your thoughts. So we're going to take the next 5 minutes to take a poll. And this poll doesn't have any open-ended question capabilities. So please share in the chat if you have something specific that you want to say that isn't captured. So let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, I can share the poll this way.
Yeah, you totally
I've
can.
never done this before. Okay, here we go. So I was just going to give it 5 minutes if you want to take the poll. Can everybody see it and fill it out?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't actually know if I can.
No, because you're a co-host, you can't.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Maybe 5 minutes is too long.
You can see the productivity on each question.
See that? It's cool. It's shifting.
So yeah, maybe like 3 minutes. Oh, I should mention that the meeting topics are multiple choice, so you can choose technically all of them if you wanted.
I see at the top, you can see how many people have finished.
Yes. Yeah, Patty, under the current platform that Peak has, we can't do the open-ended questions, but feel free to add anything into the comment section.
Hi, everybody. My name's John Stanek. I'm going to interrupt real quick because there are 70 cuckoo experts in the room, and it's so difficult to ask this question in front of such a large audience. A problem that we've been dealing with for years and years is how to monitor cuckoo prey. Does anybody have suggestions about monitoring yellow-billed cuckoo prey across their range? If you have ideas, I would love to hear them. Doesn't have to be right now. I'd be happy to chat at another time, but it's a topic that I hit a dead end with a wall all the time, and I don't know how to move forward on it.
One of the, I've also been, this is Callie, I've also been thinking about this, and I think Nick is like an ARU guy, and I was wondering if like you can census insects with ARUs, like how well you can census abundance more. Diversity, I assume, is easy, but can you get abundance?
Hey, yeah, this is Nick. I've definitely been able to pick up things like cicadas and other interesting diverse insects, but I so far haven't figured out any way to kind of get at any kind of abundance index yet. And so I'd be happy to, collaborate with someone who wants to look at that specifically, though, because we have lots of data with lots of acoustic data with lots of buzzing cicadas and other insects. So definitely an interesting thought right there.
Could you do some kind of trial where you have a bunch of cicadas captured and see how loud they are? I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough because if you have one near the microphone and it's buzzing, it's going to dominate like the whole spectrogram frequency. So it's more, I've been able to do like a presence absence thing and like over the like a certain amount of time. But yeah, it's tricky, and I just haven't had a lot of time to dive deeply into it. But it can definitely be something that affects the detectability of cuckoos when they are loud, because it's really loud, as we all know from being in the field. So that's something to consider as well.
We will also have plenty of time at the end for more thoughts on that.
Yeah. You could probably give it maybe 30 more seconds, Jenna, and then you might be getting all the answers that you'll get.
Okay, it says 52 of 68. Some people just don't want to take it. Okay, be that way. 30 seconds. Or maybe it's all the people who are co-hosts. I'm going to share the results. So can you see that?
I can, but it's someone that is not a co-host.
Yeah, I can.
Great.
Okay, so looks like October, November, it's a tight race, but November's the winner. Both. Okay, half day, yeah, half day would be good for my schedule as well. Okay, make administrative items discussed. Is there a way I can share this or save it, Kristen?
That is a great question.
Virtual.
Let me keep going through and I'll just do a quick Google search.
We can also just screenshot it too.
Yeah, that's what I was
That
thinking.
is so true.
All right, anyway, people prefer virtual. I agree. Okay, habitat use. The top ones, habitat use, restoration, management recommendations, DPS range wide status. Looks like it's all of interest. The lowest is diet. Oh, poor prey items. Never considered. Okay. Well, we'll try to save it or get a screen share. I'm just going to minimize it on my screen for now. And I was just going to open the floor for any questions, comments, suggestions that you have about the upcoming fall working group meeting. If there's I don't know, something you really want to see that wasn't represented in the poll.
This is Edwin. I just have a couple comments. One, I think it looks like most people voted for a virtual meeting.
Yeah.
I would encourage us to think about if it's only virtual, to have them shorter rather than longer sessions. I think that will increase participation, and also, I don't know about other folks, but I've maxed out on my Zoom burnout. So that's just like my personal thought on that. The other one is kind of following up on Guy Falk's comment in the chat box regarding outreach to Latin American partners. I think that's also critically important, especially as we are, moving to really further understand the migration corridors and wintering areas of the birds, that we engage those partners, in-country partners, in the conversations as project ideas are being developed. I think that that promotes, collaborations in a very respectful and equal way. And so I can help facilitate any, planning for a translation or reaching out, some of the logistics that it might take. I wouldn't want to take that on, but I can provide feedback to how we've handled it in other, such as the Partners Flight Working Group, for example, and other initiatives. So I want to emphasize that point that Falk Guy was made in the chat box.
Thanks, Edwin. Yeah. Okay, so I'm hearing virtual and half-day meetings. And I know Kristen was we had talked about options for Zoom and translator abilities, but that means Peak would have to up their Zoom. What is it called, Kristen? I don't remember exactly. But
We'd basically have to have a business class or pro account with Zoom, which is like $150 to $200
per year.
Yes.
And it brings in a translator, right? Is that kind of?
Yes, it has translator capabilities.
Well, you have to provide the actual translator. It has translator capabilities, and it's relatively easy to find very effective translators that have experience in conservation. Yeah.
Cool. Well, if Peak does that upgrade for the translator capabilities, then could definitely figure out who could be the translator, because I agree that is so important, and just expanding that network is going to be really important, I think, moving forward in the future. So I'm glad you have lots of contacts, because I have really minimal.
I'm glad you have contacts too.
Okay, well, I can stop sharing.
All right, so do we have any questions for Jenna about this process? If not, we can just open the floor generally for Q&A for everyone that presented today. And I can pull up the agenda just so, just in case not everyone can remember that. Give me 1 second. All right, so this is a time to ask any questions if you have anything on your mind. If not, I'll just give it a few minutes and then we'll end the meeting with a few closing remarks.
I see a lot of good discussions about the prey, the topic that John brought up. Does anybody want to discuss this by, turning on their mic and their video?
doesn't sound like a popular point of discussion, but I'd be happy to talk to Bruce and Carolyn at a future date. That would be fine.
That sounds good to me. This is Bruce. And
That
related,
sounds, go ahead.
Related to that, I had a question about, conceptual models that people feel capture the state of our current knowledge that might help think about limiting factors, including prey. And I know the MSCP did various conceptual models a while back, I think including cuckoo, but I wasn't sure if there were others that could be shared.
Yeah, John, I'm available to talk because we did do had some studies done along the Colorado River, but the challenge is that many of our bird species are somewhat generalists in what they're eating, and so it just ends up being such a challenging thing to sample. We did do conceptual models for all of our covered species from a restoration filter, so more of a habitat-based filter, and those summaries are all available on our website, and I'll post that website in the chat. All of the documents that we publish are there.
All right, we have lots of people sharing comments in the chat and a couple different websites. Does anyone have anything else to add? Perfect. Well, I'm just gonna say a couple things here. Does your microphone work now?
I think my speaker or my microphone is actually breaking. So I think it's just in and out. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, if you don't want to chance it, I can totally just take over.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. I think we had some really great talks. I was really excited to see folks starting to network and connect, and to also step up to be part of the working group and to take on some of those action items. So I think we really have some great things lined up for the working group. And I, also wanted to mention that just keep an eye out for some of these things that came out of this meeting to be sent out to the working group on the listserv and to be put on our website. Keep on sending me stuff. Send me stuff about upcoming workshops. Send me stuff about, any questions that you have, any comments you have about how the working group is functioning, how you'd like to participate, etc. And, keep an eye out for that fall meeting and some of the planning that's going to be going on during the fall meeting. We might send out a request to invite people to speak during that fall meeting. And just go check out our website. And I just want to thank everybody for coming, and also really thank Peak for all the great work that they're doing, and thank Kristen for moderating this meeting. I think it was a really great meeting, and I was really excited about hearing a lot of the topics today.
Yeah,
And,
thank you to all our presenters and the people that talked today for taking the time and doing that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, in that case, that was everything I was going to say as well. So thank you so much. I popped Hira's email back into the chat just to have it as the last comment. Everything was recorded today, so that should be out to you sooner than the last one was. And we have the script for this saved, as well as the poll results. So all of that should be out to you shortly.